always so great to be here. Thank you so much. And I thank you for sitting through 3 lectures. That's not a small thing. So, okay, so they're talking about light, and since we're before Hanukkah, I thought we never spoke about miracles, and it's such an important thing to really understand what the Torah means by a miracle. And so today I hope, with Hashem's help, that we'll try to figure out what a miracle is, what its purpose is, how we're to relate to miracles in our lives, and how do we bring them into our lives. So with Hashem's help, we'll try to do that together. The first thing we know in Hebrew, the word for miracle is nes. Nes obviously means what is a miracle? Something that we attribute to divine intervention. Very often we understand miracles as things that are dazzling with lights and wonder and otherworldly displays. But basically a miracle is something that we are clearly able to attribute to divine intervention. Now, I always like to start at the beginning. And Pirkei Avot teaches us that after the 6 days of creation and before the first Shabbat, in the twilight in between, Hashem created 10 things. And we're not going to go through all 10 things now, but some of you might be familiar. The opening to the well of Miriam, the staff of Aaron, the shamir, that little worm that would do the cutting instead of metal, etc., etc., etc. So what's very, very interesting about this is that we could say these things were part of the creative process, but these things were actually after the creative process. So they were both of this world and out of this world in their own category in that twilight time. And one thing we could understand from that is that Hashem is the root of everything, and embedded in that trajectory of the creative process was also the possibilities for miracles to exist. On another level altogether, to me anyway, what it spoke very loudly is that the creative process is a miracle, and everything in it is miraculous. I mean, we just have to look at our biology to a little bit to begin to appreciate that, or the exact placement of our world in the universe to understand how that is, or the life-sustaining balance in our atmosphere for humans to exist, or the fact that we're sitting here together, this girl from Brooklyn, don't know how that happened. All these things in our lives really, really are to be, when we look at them with a certain way and with the understanding of that twilight creative period, that the creation is a miracle. King David says it as well, and Brody is the first place that we mesh. My husband quoted King David in his last verse in the Psalms, Kol HaNeshama Tahalel Yah, which means that every soul will bless, will exalt, will laud Hashem. But there's another way the sages understand that verse. Every soul being a miracle, every neshama, read differently, is nishima. Every breath that we take is miraculous. And so King David, in a way, is also moving us in that direction, that the creative process and everything that Hashem brought into being, that we know as reality, is actually in of itself miraculous. And we know, of course, that teva, which means nature, is the same gematria, numerical value as Elokim, which is Hashem manifesting himself through nature. That means Hashem is broadcasting his being, and he chose to do so through the way and means and the creative process that he put us into. Now, so in a way, we could say that Hashem is manifesting to us in a most remarkable way, and to us this is just nature, natural. These are the things that we've become accustomed to. We've become desensitized in a way to that, to the miraculous existence that we live. Now, Nachmanides, not Maimonides, Nachmanides, the Ramban, actually says that all the miracles that we encounter in the Tanakh have their roots in the creative process. And he gives an example. He says, for example, on the second day of creation, Hashem separated between the waters of above and the waters below. And this was the precedent, this was the root that made it possible for the splitting of the sea. And again, we see the sages, again and again we will see this, they are trying not to make miracles bigger than nature, but to fit them into Hashem's universe that he has created for us. The Rambam, the Maimonides that both my husband and son spoke about, he looks at miracles a little bit differently. He says two things that are interesting and worthy of note and that have pertained to what we're talking about now regarding miracles. The first thing he says is that miracles, that when we perceive something as a miracle, it's because it's something, events out of order. What does this mean? For example, if we read the prophets Isaiah, Zechariah, Ezekiel, and Micha, who all talk about these wondrous, terrifying end of days scenarios, when we read those verses, when we listen to those verses with 2,000-year-old ears, they sound supernatural. But when we would read those verses about the end of days today, they sound remarkably like atomic and nuclear fallout and battle. So this is what the Rambam is trying to suggest, that something that is miraculous with our eyes is because we don't have the understanding of the nature or the science to understand how this too could fit into Hashem's plan for us. So Maimonides also says that it's so important, whenever possible, to describe viable, natural understandings to what we perceive as miracles. And he uses for this also, he says, the laws of probability, statistics, timing, causation. These things we want to utilize, like when something happens at exactly the right time, that's miraculous. Or that I went here, so it led me to meet this person who sent me there, and then once I got there, I ended up having to go there. That causation, the Rambam is very into looking for that in our lives and being able to identify those as miraculous. And rather than minimize Hashem's miracles, this concept opens up and sensitizes us to our entire existence and everything we go through to train us to look for those miracles. So, you know, it was something very interesting that, again, Hillel showed the picture of a burning bush, and in Exodus 3:5, you know, Hashem says to Moshe, Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha ki admat kodesh. Who? This is hallowed land. Take your shoes off in order to stand here. Now, we could understand this verse in light of what we're talking about. First of all, he's telling him to take his shoes off. We know the Kohanim also took their shoes off, because when we are barefoot on Hashem's Adamah, and we're rooted in that Adamah, we are connecting with Hashem's creation maximally. And you know, there's one way to understand this verse, that this is Admat Kodesh, this wondrous thing that you're seeing. This wondrous thing that you're seeing is part of the Admat Kodesh, and of course human beings as part of the Admat Kodesh, the holy, hallowed Adamah, and that nature and marvelous things that we see, we are rooted in our material existence. We can connect to it in this realm, and we don't have to look at the supernatural. We don't have to go to the supernatural. There's a very, very, very interesting story in the Talmud about a man who becomes a widower and is able to nurse his young son. And what is interesting about this miracle is not the miracle. What's interesting about this miracle is the very intriguing argument that takes place between the sages, because they shift between praise for this man and indictment of this man. And that to us is really an eye-opener about what the Torah wants us to look for as human beings in his world. Because, on one hand, yes, he merited having this mind-boggling miracle. He could nurse his baby. This is mind-boggling. On the other hand, the indictment came from, wait a minute, why did he not use what was readily available to him in the natural creation to solve this problem? Why didn't he use the miracles of nature? Why did he wait and go to something out of nature? And that is interesting, because that is another piece in the puzzle that we're trying to build today about what is a miracle, what is it supposed to be, and how do we relate to this concept, and how do we see them, how do we bring them. So Hashem chose to manifest himself in nature. This is no small thing. And we see from the sages, we see from the story in the Talmud, Hashem's manifestation through nature is something very precious, and that's why Hashem chose it for us, and we do not want to minimize it. We want to look at its intricacies and as much as possible. We see another very interesting thing in Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 2, talking about the false prophet. The false prophet performs miracles, and he's a false prophet. We could read the verses. So first we were looking at a possible indictment on the recipient of the miracle. And now we are seeing that the agent of the miracle could also be problematic, meaning that a miracle is not something wow necessarily. So the false prophet, we're told, does these miracles, and we have to recognize it as a false prophet despite the dazzling wonders that we may see. And it's very interesting because it says there that Hashem is testing us to see if we truly love Hashem. That's interesting because we said nes is a miracle, nisayon, which means test or challenge. Of course, we hear the root nes in there. So another purpose of a miracle is to test us. So in this case, it's to test, do you really love Hashem? Are you loyal to Hashem? You're seeing this dazzling stuff. Are you able to be attuned, discerning, astute, use your mind to look at the complete picture? Or are you just dazzled, bowled over, and hook, line, and sinker? And there was a miracle here utilized for this test. Another reason that miracles are tests to us is because, on one hand, a miracle certainly could uplift us. No question about it, inspire us. We see something happening, and it's so clearly the hand of Hashem. We feel so thankful, so wonderful, so relieved, so inspired, and it can indeed uplift us. The problem is with a miracle like that is an overt miracle, is that this inspiration is not sustainable. It's not sustainable because it was something that happened to us and not something we participated in. And we see again another root of that contains the word nes, miracle, in it. Okay? Nesog. Nesog means to retreat. Nesog, to retreat. Because a miracle, as much as it could uplift us and it's not sustainable, it evaporates very quickly because, it wasn't something that we did. And the dazzle wears off and the excitement wears off. And another reason it could cause the nesog, the retreat, is because Hashem put us in this world to find Him, to seek Him in a very complex reality in which we live. Now, when a overt miracle slaps us across the face, it's very hard to deny its existence. And in that place, we lose our free will. And so again, it's this shortcut, which on one hand may be a wonderful thing, but unsustainable, as we said. On the other hand, we are sort of losing our purpose, which is not to be spoon-fed, but to have to work hard to find Him in a very confused reality in which we live. We see this very, very clearly with the young nation of Israel. I don't know if anybody's ever asked themselves this question before, but we notice the greatest condensation of miracles in the Tanakh is as the nation is moving from exile to exodus. It's this huge concentration of miracles, and then they sort of peter off here and there, and that's it. And we have to ask ourselves why. It's a really important question, and it fits in exactly to what we're talking about today, that the abundance of revealed miracles did not seem to gel the emunah or the confidence of these people. We see again and again there was this pattern in the earliest developmental stages of this nation in which these miracles sort of brought them to a high, like on the sea, in which we see it says, and they believed in Hashem and Moshe his servant. 5 minutes later, they're not believing anymore. We go down a few verses after the song on the sea, and there's crisis. And the crisis continues, which means that that belief, that faith that was won by something that was a wow, it could not last, again, because they were not participants in this. So what we are beginning to see is that a diet rich in revealed miracles did not circumvent crises in faith, and had the purpose was very, very specific. The abundance of these miracles in the earliest stages of the nation of Israel's development as a people came because they were understandably spiritually immature. And they needed the spoon feeding, they needed the coddling, the uplifting, the extra nurturing, the support, the hand holding that these very overt signs of Hashem's presence would show. Similarly to a small child needs to hear good job, needs to know that we're backing them up and we're helping them and we're holding out our hands for them and we're clearly there and we're there when they're falling asleep. We're right there. And it's not because these overt signs of the parental presence / Hashem's presence does not mean they are great. It means they are needy. And that Hashem understands that in His compassion, and it is a legitimate and important aspect of development, but if it stays on that level, it is no longer useful or healthy. So we see that as the nation matured and grew, slowly the miracles started slowing up. The well left, the clouds of glory left, they crossed into the land, the manna left. Interesting, the first battle, the Battle of Jericho, again, was miraculous. First time in, very scary, hold my hand, and then slowly, fewer and far between overt miracles, only as punctuation points at various times when the nation, of course, had that specific need. But it was something that had its time and was not the preferred way, as we see from the sages on, and all the different points we're making, was not the preferred way for Hashem to run his world. He wanted the nation to, and he expected them to, get on with their business of living in a worldly way and not an otherworldly way, and connecting to Hashem through the daily miracles. Now, of course, the whole reason we have this topic today is because when we think Hanukkah, we think miracles. And this is very beautiful, but the more we dig into it, the more beautiful it will come. It won't take away the magic of Hanukkah. It will uplift the magic of Hanukkah because, for example, the first thing that comes to mind when we think miracles very, very often is the lighting of the Hanukkah, commemorating the miracle of the oil. But what's very, very interesting, if each of you at your own time will look in the Al HaNisim prayer, the regarding miracles prayer, which we say all throughout the 8 days of Hanukkah, it goes on and on and on about the battle victory. At the end, there's like a P.S. so that they went into the sanctuary, found the oil, and lit it. But that is not the focal point. That is not the focal point of the story, of the Al HaNisim. Regarding miracles, the focal point is the battle victory. The few against the many, etc., etc., etc. So, again, it was against all odds. It was like the Rambam says, probability against all the odds. And it's important to note that the struggle against the Greeks was going on for a very, very, very long time, way before our Hanukkah story opens. That means the nation of Israel was subjugated for a very, very long time before the Hanukkah story takes place. And the turning point was when the Maccabim stood up and they said, Mi la Hashem Elai, who is for God to me, which means they stood up. They were proactive, they made a move, they took matters into their own hands, they didn't wait for Hashem to save them. And because what happened was they opened the door to the miracle, and the miracle happened. So it was the commemoration here of Al HaNisim is the action taken that created the possibility for something else to happen, to let Hashem in through the door. They took action, they didn't wait for Hashem to save them. So this miraculous victory of the Maccabim, we have to say it's miraculous. Clearly, statistically, it made no sense, but it was couched in natural possibility. And that's the beauty of Hashem's miracles. It's right here. It could be, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to make it happen? So they were a perfect example of faith in action. And that is a theme running through the Torah again and again and again. Faith in action. It's the same thing with the oil, actually. Because there was one little container of oil that they found that the Greeks happened to miss. So it was not so probable, it was possible. They missed it, okay. But what is really, really amazing is that when they came into the Heichal, when they came into the sanctuary, and the destruction and the defilement of the sanctuary, which was so overwhelming, and they're looking and they're seeing everything is destroyed and defiled, they had every reason not to search high and low and comb through the wreckage for something. Every reason not to. Because appearances would have it that there's every reason not to. But there was a thirst there to participate, to light the menorah. There was a thirst there They were eager for this mitzvah. And because they searched, they found it. Again, they weren't under obligation even, because according to Jewish law, you are exempt from lighting the menorah if no oil is to be had. And in all intents and purposes, it looked like no oil was to be had until new oil could be produced. But they weren't satisfied with that, and they're putting in that extra effort based on an unbelievable thirst to do the right thing, to be proactive as they possibly could, is what made them find the cruse of oil. So, again, as miraculous as it was also couched in this natural dance between man and Hashem. So, they could have made, they could have despaired, they could have waited, but Hashem answered them in kind because of how they chose to approach it. As we know, this very famous psalm in Psalm 121, verse 5, Hashem is your shadow. We've said this, we've discussed this several times. Hashem does as we do. We like to think it's the opposite way around in certain ways, but the way Hashem set up his world is he's waiting for us to act, and he will follow. He will do. And as a matter of fact, when we look at Genesis 6:9, it says Noah walked with Elohim. And Noah was very praiseworthy for walking with Elohim. But it's not really what Hashem wanted. Because when we go to Genesis 17:1, he commands Avraham, he says, Hitalech lifanai v'hiyeh tamim. Walk before me and be tamim. My husband was talking about a tamim, that Jacob was tamim yesterday in the Parsha. Tamim meaning whole, pure, simple, unsophisticated, or harmonious. It means very many things. But Hashem, and we have a little hint what the mistake that Noah made was, because Noah walked with Elohim. Elohim is, of course, the name of Hashem that connotes din, that connotes judgment. So in a place of judgment, din, the letter of the law, I have no input. Can't change anything. Either it's black or it's white. It's yes or it's no. So Noah went with he saw Hashem as the letter of the law. But what Hashem wants and is asking, and we see it with Avraham, is the Hashem aspect. If we don't believe that we can impact anything because it's very rigid, it is what it's going to be, then we don't run ahead. We just take our cues from. But if, like Hashem wants Avraham to do, and as we see coming out more and more with how Hashem wants us to impact the natural world, we see that Avraham believed he could impact. He was walking with Hashem. He believed he was rachamim. He was merciful. That means you could be fluid. You could be flexible. You could debate it. You could try something different, a different way in. And he therefore impacted very, very greatly on his surroundings. Now, the Maccabim, that was really their mantra. It was the same kind of thing, because both the battle of the oil and the miracle of the oil and of the battle was brought about only through action, which means pushing against my own limitations. And again, another aspect of a nes is another facet of nes, of miracle, is the spirit of courage, which means I am pushing against my limitations to take myself as far as I can in the realm of what I have. I can't do more than I have, but I could do everything with what I have. Everything I could possibly do with what I have, and we see this theme repeated again and again. We see it with Nachshon, famously, who jumped into the sea until it came to his nostrils. There's nothing else he could do. So he opened the door for Hashem. It was the partnership. We see the same thing with Elisha, with the widow of one of the sons of the prophets, and she had no money, and she had these debtors, and he said, collect all the pots And as long as there were pots, every pot that she collected was filled with the oil. But when did the oil stop pouring, this miraculous? When she had no more pots. Again, she took it as far as she could. She got every pot she could get. She participated, made a vessel to contain that shefa, that kindness of Hashem, that Hashem wants to give it, made it possible through saying, I'll go as far as I can go. And so it was, again, that partnership that brought it around. So, again, we have this idea of the partnership in creating a miracle again and again and again. Hashem wants a sign of life from us and not to wait around to be saved. It's the opposite of what Hashem wants, putting us into this world. Now we see a very interesting aspect of Hanukkah that it's unique to Hanukkah. We don't have it in any of the other holidays or festivals. There is a miracle, there's a mitzvah, a commandment to publicize the miracle. We do not have this with any other national miracle. We don't have it with the splitting of the sea. We don't have it with the Sinai revelation. We do not have a mitzvah, a commandment, an instruction to publicize any other national miracle. And again, another aspect of Nes, we said Nes, miracle, Nes, Nisayon, test, Nes, Nisog, to retreat. And now we have Nes as a flagpole. A Nes is another word for flagpole, which something that we elevate, we rise up, we publicize. And the reason I think is that Hanukkah is so unique in this commandment to publicize the miracle is that I think Hanukkah is a standard, a good measuring rod for Hashem's ideal miracle. Because it's a partnership with of us using what Hashem has given us and partnering Him in what we have, and then He will come and meet us at that place. So, again, another thing about Nes also means an example, to set out an example. Again, very similar to the flagpole idea of publicizing it. So we have this one thing, partnership, which is why it is so unique and Hashem's standard for a miracle. Hashem wants us to partner Him in bringing miracles into our lives, the little ones, the big ones, all of them. If we don't take a step, there's no reason He should take a step. If we don't create a vessel, there's nothing for Him to fill. I know that it's easier said than done. That's why we have 120 years. It's a lifetime of work. But so so we see in the Al Hanisim, in the regarding miracles prayer that we recite during the whole Hanukkah, we see there's two words. There's Yeshua and there's Purkan. And they both mean salvation. But a Yeshua, there's a Yeshua and Purkan are two different types of salvation. We have the aspect of salvation that we take ourselves to the edge of reality, to the confines of our natural possibilities, and we're doing the most we can for ourselves. And then we have the aspect of Hashem going beyond the outer limits of our own possibilities and taking over where we can't anymore. So the aspect of partnership is one of the reasons why Hanukkah is the degel, the flagpole, the ideal of what Hashem sees as a perfect miracle. There's another aspect here. Again, very often through Jewish law, through halacha, we learn very deep concepts that are just remarkable. So there's another idea in Jewish law regarding the publicizing of this miracle, is that in Israel, this is the preferred way to do it. I understand that in the diaspora, the Jewish people sort of, which should speak pretty loud to the Jewish people of the diaspora, they sort of light their Hanukkah in the middle of the room, away from the windows, not to call too much attention to themselves, but the mitzvah of lighting the Hanukkah is publicizing it. So in Israel, you find people having their Hanukkahot set up, and they even have special glass containers so the wind doesn't blow them out. in the window, at the door, at the entrance to the home. They really are out there because it is a mitzvah to publicize. So the halacha states that when setting up the Chanukiah, the Hanukkah menorah, it cannot be above a certain height and it cannot be below a certain height. There's a range. And this range is eye range. It could be looking up, it could be looking down, but not something that is hard to see or out of range. And this has a very deep, a simple and deep understanding that if we do not see Hashem's miracles in our lives, they really have no way of enriching us. There has to be something in our sights, something that we could look for, something that we could see, something that we're willing to look for. And because Hashem is manifesting himself in our lives all the time. And the question is, did we see it? Are we looking for it? Are we setting ourselves up to see it? And we see something very, very interesting regarding the manna, and this is remarkable, and some of you may be familiar with this, that in Exodus chapter 16, verse 15, it says the manna falls, and then they go out there and they say, Lo yadu manhu. They didn't know what it was. So we can give them the benefit of the doubt. How could they know what it was? They never had it before. There's no such thing existed before. They didn't expect it, except there's one flaw in that crystal. Because before that, in verse 4, Hashem told them exactly what he was going to do. I am going to send you bread from the heaven. It's going to come. It's going to look. It's going to be. He told them in advance. And yet it was hitting them. And they're looking at each other and they don't know what it is. And there's a very, very common human there's something very human in that, the sages teach us also that the person who for a miracle occurs doesn't even recognize the miracle. It's sometimes it's other people who recognize the miracle, but it's not. It's something that we clearly need to set our sights for. And again, also in regard, just like we saw in regards to the false prophet, there was an aspect where Hashem says in the verses, I'm sending this false prophet who's actually doing all these miracles in order to test if you love me. Are you blinded by A, B, or C? Or are you perceiving? Are you looking? Also about the manna, we see leman anasenu, to test them. To test them. There's all different, the sages talk about, we don't have time, all the different tests that related to the man. But again, the bottom line here is a miracle in our life is something that requires us to ask the question, are we going to connect the dots? Are we going to connect the dots and see the miracle? And the truth is, the Jewish people don't only thank Hashem for miracles on Hanukkah and on Purim. Every single day in the modim prayer, in the silent prayer 3 times a day, we thank Hashem for the miracles. We thank Hashem for the miracles that are imanu, v'niflotecha, all the different miracles that He does for us daily. And imanu, which means with us, are the miracles that are inside of us, which means the ones that we pulled off through blood, sweat, and tears, and we pulled down from Hashem. And the niflotecha are the ones that we got just as gifts that we did nothing for, independent of anything we could have done. But it's something that is a daily part of our lives. And King David says it very beautifully in Psalm 33 in verse 22, Vayhi chasdecha aleinu ka'asher yachalnu lach. That Hashem's kindness is upon us as yachalnu lach. The word yachal, we see the word chala when we spoke about chala. We see it vayachulu, we see it in the Kiddush, and we see it here yachalnu, because this word means a lot of different things. I like to call it a transformational word, because every time we see it, it's really taking one thing, doing something to it, looking at it a certain way, bringing it to a certain place, and bringing Hashem into it. Every time we see this word, that's the process that's taking place. This word chal, because chal means chol, it means the mundane. So Hashem's chesed is upon us. The way we use our chol, our mundane lives, the things that come to us, the challenges that we have, the limitations that we're faced with, the aggravation in our lives, the gifts in our lives, the way we use that chol, we can transform it. Yachil means to begin. We can begin manipulating it into something else, and so that Hashem could chal, rest upon it, come and join us in it. We discussed this at length when we were discussing challah, but again, it's the word. It's the word that we see here, this transformational word of us interacting with what we've been given. The transformational part of being a human being. Now, Rav Kook says that the cruse of undefiled oil represents the indestructible spark of light, like my husband was saying, in each and every one of us. That we all have the tselem, the spark of light, and it could be maybe hidden, but not lost. It could be out of sight, but it can't be muddied. In that place where it is, it's pristine and it's there and it's waiting for each person to kindle that greatness in themselves, to reveal their own miraculous potential. Because the truth is, a human being in this world is a miracle. Truly, if we start to contemplate it, it is. So Hanukkah really is a celebration of human potential. And the miraculous part of being a human being, because we're part of this world and we're beyond it. Because we have that soul inside of ourselves. So, the big lesson of Hanukkah for all of us, like a real takeaway, is we may not be passive in the things that upset us in our lives, the places where we feel stuck, the things that we want to happen for ourselves. And it's hard work because we really have to jump in, like Nachshon. We have to take it to the edge of the limits, and Hashem is waiting and expecting this of us. This is not a waiting game on our part, because the entire purpose of creation is that we partner Hashem. The entire purpose. So by us acting upon our circumstances, we are inviting Hashem in to journey with us in this world, which is very revolutionary. But that's what Hashem is telling us. That's what He's expecting of us. So we have to uplift our own lives. He's not going to do it for us, and no one else is going to do it for us. And when we uplift our own lives, we're uplifting our little piece of the universe. We're illuminating that space that we walk, the environment that we live in, which is diametrically opposed to the Greeks. Now, the things that the Greeks sent out their edicts on were, very famous. We discussed Shabbat, the new moon, meat and circumcision, a bunch of decrees, those most famously. But there's a common denominator in all these decrees. And all these decrees were against places in which we interface and act upon and influence the creative process. And the Greeks did not want that. That means you cannot sanctify time. You cannot sanctify the body. You cannot do these things. It is what it is, what it is, what it is. And that was the big clash of the Greeks. They did not believe that we could bring miracles into our lives, that it's up to us to change Hashem's world and perfect it through our actions and choices. And I just want to end with a beautiful idea of Rav Harlap. He says such a beautiful thing about the Al HaNisim regarding miracles prayers that we say on Hanukkah, is that we are accustomed to thinking when we are we are praying this prayer, we are praising Hashem. But Hashem does not need the praise. My husband spoke all about that yesterday, whoever was lucky enough to be at that beautiful Torah class. But so Rav Chalap is mirroring that idea. This regarding miracles, prayer has nothing to do with Hashem. It's not about Hashem. It's about encouraging us forward. Look at the miracles that you could do when you push yourself to the end, the edge, the exhausted place where there's nothing else to do, and then in that place you really are helpless. And in that place only Hashem could step in. But until you get there, you haven't brought the potential for that miracle. And so Rav Chalap says that the whole idea of this prayer is that we should be encouraged, praised for what we're capable of, and encouraged by what we're capable of, and to bring us to that place of where, Bezrat Hashem, we will bring miracles into our lives. So, blessings on all of us. We all could use a few. So, thank you very, very much.